Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dissidents and Dictators. I'm Alicia Maldonado, and sitting across from me is my lovely co-host, Casey Michelle.
Hello.
Our faithful producer, Omar, is here as well. He says hello to y'all. Joining us today from Germany is Negin Niknaam. She's a friend and social media manager of Toomaj Salahi, the Iranian hip-hop artist whose death sentence was recently overturned by the Iranian Supreme Court. She's here to tell us about that and what's going on in the future. She's also joined by HRF's Claudia Bennett, a legal and programs officer, who's been working on Salahi's immediate and unconditional release. All that coming up. Negin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
How's Germany looking today?
It's a bit warm today.
It's very warm here too.
Yes.
Negin, it's so great to have you joining us today. And again, for folks who may remember Claudia Bennett, who's also in the studio with us today, she's actually been on a podcast before many, many years ago, or maybe it was just a few months. I don't know. Time is all relative, I suppose. But Claudia, we're very excited to have you back as well with us today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Now, Claudia, last time you were here, we were talking about fast fashion, forced labor in the Uyghur region in China. Today, we're talking about something that is, in one sense, completely different insofar as about Toomaj, this Iranian hip-hop artist, sentenced to death for his art, for his song, for his voice. And again, we're going to talk about some of the news relating to Toomaj's case in a moment, but even though it is, of course, disparate and different from things like fast fashion, at the end of the day, we're talking about authoritarian regimes clinging to power, targeting those that are opposed to them, that may undermine their regimes themselves. And of course, Toomaj giving voice to so many of those in Iran who have been wronged, who have been targeted, have been repressed, in many cases killed by the regime itself. But I don't need to talk about Toomaj. Negin, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us about Toomaj.
So hi everyone, thank you for inviting me. I should say this wasn't Toomaj's first arrest, and he was arrested before for his protest music. But this time, with the height of the nationwide protest of woman life freedom in Iran, in addition to releasing 2 of his protest songs, Toomaj also participated in the demonstrations in the streets. He released a video of himself and used all his platforms to be the people's voice. And the regime of Iran couldn't tolerate all this courage and violently arrested him. And he was subjected to the most intense physical torture for 12 hours, leaving him completely unconscious for 20 days. His ribs, fingers, and leg were broken. He couldn't see for several days. And he was also held in solitary confinement for 253 days, which was very terrible. And finally, the Revolutionary Court sentenced him to 6 years in prison after 1 year and 20 days of imprisonment. And after his release on bail, Toomaj posted a video on YouTube where he spoke openly about the torture he suffered and exposed the regime's lies and propaganda. And 2 days after this video, he was arrested again with violence, and then he was sentenced to death. And the judge of the case stated that the reason for issuing the death sentence was Toomaj's post on social media and also his music. So unbelievably, he was sentenced to death for speaking out. And yes, after this verdict, there were many protests inside Iran and also outside of the Iran. And most recently, the Oslo Freedom Forum awarded Toomaj with Havel Prize, which we really appreciate and supported. And finally, due to increasing international pressure, his death sentence was overturned, and the case has now been sent to appeal courts.
Can you talk us through what that looks like? What that process will mean coming up? Are we hopeful that he'll get released? What's next?
Yes, actually, it affects the verdict. I mean, it's really important for us to make our voice louder for political prisoners in Iran, and the fear of our voice, the dictator regimes, the fear of our voice.
Negin, you mentioned just a moment ago, and I just want listeners to be aware that Toomaj, even while he was undergoing all of this, was recently awarded by Human Rights Foundation, Oslo Freedom Forum, the Václav Havel Prize for creative dissent, again, for using his voice, using his song, using his lyrics, using his presence as a voice for all those who don't have one in Iran. He was a pretty well-known rapper and hip-hop artist before all of this, right? He is, I mean, he's obviously he's a male rapper, but when the Women Life Freedom protest first began, a year or so ago, he didn't seem to hesitate. He jumped right in, writing songs, speaking on behalf of, again, especially all these young women that are standing up to the regime in Iran. Did you know Toomaj at that point? Were you already working with him? Were you already close to him at that point?
Yes, actually, I met him before his first arrest. After releasing the music, it calls the mouse hole. And when he released this song, I was surprised to find someone rapping so bravely and openly in Iran. And that's what initially drew me to follow his social media pages and write to him frequently. And he also answered my messages very friendly. So I met him, I think, 3 years before his arrest.
3 years before his arrest. So you've known him for a few years at this point. And of course, in that time, again, looking at it from the outside in, it seems like he hasn't been silenced. He hasn't been stopped, even though the regime has attempted to do everything they can to stop him. His impact continues to this day.
Yes, of course. Toomaj has a very strong and charismatic character in Iran society. He's known for his courage and resistance. So as expected, despite the high psychological pressure or so-called white torture inside the prison and heavy restrictions placed upon him, he remains strong even now behind the cold bars in Iran.
So, Claudia, let's bring you into the conversation right now, because you've, I think for me personally, you were the first one that put Toomaj's case on my radar because of some of the work that you were doing. How did you come to be working on Toomaj's case in Iran?
Yeah, actually, former OFF speaker and activist and actress Nazanin Bennett, who spoke at OFF 2023, approached me and said, would you like to work on it? And then I was put in touch with Negin, and it's kind of gone from there. So we are now working with Dowdy Street Chambers in the UK, as well as Index on Censorship, to continue advocating for Toomaj's unconditional release. We will be filing a UN working group petition on arbitrary detention for Toomaj in hopes that, hopefully by that point he might have been released, but just another tool to show that he has been arbitrarily detained.
Right. So this toolkit, this playbook involves coverage, a PR surrounding it, awareness, and also legal filings on Toomaj's behalf as well? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's the way that we as a legal team at HRF work, right? We want to attack it from all angles. There's no, the law isn't by itself isn't enough, honestly. Like, advocacy is huge. What Negin does for Toomaj is huge. Having someone outside being, a voice, continuing the posts on social media. We've really appreciated since Saturday the amount of media coverage that we have received for Toomaj's case. But my biggest, voice right now is we need to keep it going. Like, something in the news for 2 days doesn't change. We need to keep it up until he is unconditionally released and completely free from judicial harassment.
And just again, for context, can you tell us what happened just a few days ago? You mentioned Saturday, which is a few days before recording this. What happened?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court overturned his death sentence. And while that's a huge relief and a huge win, they also said that the 6 years that Negin said earlier was excessive and against Iranian law. But the lower court, who have already resentenced him to death, have a chance to probably do it again. So it's not completely over. Hopefully they don't do it. But last time, this already happened before, right? It's kind of deja vu. And they basically said the Supreme Court, that was just a suggestion, not a direct instruction. However, if you are in a democracy, if the Supreme Court of the United States says something, the whole country acts. It's absolutely bonkers in a way that they can just dilly-dally around. But Negin might have something to say on this as well.
Yes. Actually, as you said, we need more pressure. Also, international pressure is very important to us because it may come that, again, Revolutionary Court in Isfahan issued another verdict. And yes, you said everything, I think. We need more pressure for him.
Is there a time frame that we're looking at for some of these decisions to maybe made, or?
I don't think so, because they're the decisions based on the situation in Iran.
Yeah, we have the elections on Friday.
Yes.
And those are the Iranian presidential elections.
Yes, correct. Not just any election. So that will be pretty telling, I think. Shambolic, to say the least.
Negin, we have been able to get some comments from Toomaj regarding the recent decision and his status, but I think you have another quote you'd like to share from him for listeners today?
Yes, sure. I have a quote from him, and he told me specifically for this program, he told me, from a certain point on, the word I became meaningless to me. I can't distinguish myself from my people anymore. Even if I try to imagine a future, it's a future for all of us. For me, these incidents were part of our past. The rocks may have hurt us sometimes, but that's the nature of this past.
Beautiful. Negin, are you surprised by the lengths the Iranian regime has gone to target Toomaj?
No, because they're targeting always the people that who have a loud voice in Iran. They try to imprison them. They try to execute them. But in Toomaj's case, we were really lucky to have him right now, because they are afraid of him, because he has a very loud voice in Iran society, and they are afraid of these people, and they try to imprison them. And because of international pressure, we have him now. We still have him alive.
You said earlier that in his first arrest, he was in solitary confinement and tortured as well. For the second time around, has that been a similar scenario? Has he been tortured again?
Yes, in his first arrest for the mouse hole, he was imprisoned in solitary confinement, I think, for 3 days, and the second time for 253 days.
Just for clarification purposes, so Toomaj was also arrested in, I believe, 2021, right, Negin? Pre-Women Life Freedom protest.
Right, okay.
For another song. So this is pretty continuous. And then 2022 for divination and a few others, and then released and then put back.
So Divination is a song that he wrote with the lyrics that harken to Mahsa Amini's murder.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it's quite courageous to have gone through one bout of jail and torture and then to get released and commit, in some sort of sense, an even more egregious crime, quote, by speaking out for someone who'd been murdered by the regime or by the police. That speaks a lot to his courage, I think.
I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing. The first arrest after divination, he was arrested literally one day after speaking on CBS News saying the Iranian regime's not going to like this or something along those lines. Like he knows what is at stake, and I think that's what makes him such a amazing human. And I mean, I honestly can't wait to meet him one day. To say that, because it's like many of the dissidents in our community who go through arbitrary detention, right? Like they know what they're doing and they're willing to do it to protect, or not even protect, instill democracy in these countries.
I think we should quote the lyrics to Divination, which go, someone's crime was that her hair was flowing in the wind. Someone's crime was that he or she was brave and outspoken, which is beautiful in one way because, representing and standing up for women in Iran, but also in a roundabout way talking about himself for being, someone who's outspoken. And I don't know if he would ascribe it to himself, brave though he is.
Well, again, it gets back to his recent statement that there is no I anymore.
Right.
He is not doing this for himself. He's not doing this for his own sake, but for the sake of Iranians writ large. Again, obviously, the world of hip-hop has this incredible lineage, this incredible history of protests, of pro-democracy movements, of giving voice to the voiceless around the world. I'm wondering, in Toomaj's case, has the international hip-hop community outside of Iran stepped up in his defense to speak on his behalf and support him, or is there more that the international hip-hop community can be doing?
More reactions from rappers and hip-hop artists in America, but we didn't have it, unfortunately. But I think two well-known rappers in America, I think one of them are Ice Cube. He posted a story on his social media account on Instagram, and he wrote something about Toomaj. I can't remember it very well, but from hip hop artists and also singers, pop artists from Italy, and also from Iran, we heard something, but it was not very strong, I think.
So there's room for more,
Yes.
of course.
Yeah, so can you talk about a little bit more about the international pressures? Do you think, was it the award? Was it the media that surrounding the Havel Prize that kind of spurred on some more of this international attention? Or, is there a place where you can pinpoint it really kind of exploding more?
Yes, actually, they want to silence the voices, the regime of Iran. They want to silence all voices and do whatever they want. And when something happens in international community outside of Iran in freedom, for example, this brilliant Havel Prize ceremony for him, it was very, very effective. It was very impactful for his case. Because the regime of Iran sees that, okay, he has now international support. He awarded with Havel Prize, for example, and they're afraid of our voices. And I think it's very important. And after he received this award, in prison, they told him that, oh, well, you are now very well known in international community. The regime of Iran told him. So I think it's very important to have his support.
One of the themes we often talk about on this podcast is that the more these regimes try to crush dissent, the more they just create it, and vocal dissent to boot. Claudia, can you talk about, what others can be doing? We talked a little bit about what's next, but for us who are, in the international community.
Yeah, I think it's just not forgetting about Toomaj. Like, we are all inundated by media consistently, and I also some of the headlines have been a bit clickbaity, for lack of a better word, like as if like the fight is over, and it's not.
Right.
Until Toomaj is completely free and not going to face any more charges, any more detention, torture, solitary confinement. The list goes on. We will continue doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So the more you can post on social media or attend a protest if it happens, or talk to your representatives, right? Like the US could do more, the UK could do more, Europe could do more. Everyone could do more. My home country of New Zealand could do more. Like it's, I think the more pressure, the better. And we've seen success, right, in our, past cases. So there's no harm in continuing to put pressure. And like, I think the bottom line is like, you sitting in a democracy, like, could you imagine if one of your favorite musicians was in prison for the song that they wrote?
Right.
Like, just take that to heart and think about it. It's like the craziest thing on earth.
Right.
And it's ironic. The charge that he was on was corruption on earth, which barely has any definition.
Right,
No one really knows what
exactly.
that means.
It'd be a great title for a song.
It would be a great one.
Maybe we could pitch that to him once
Yeah.
he's released. It's like, these crimes are so, as Negin said earlier, like they're clearly just afraid of him.
Yeah.
And they know his power. They know the power of a song. They know that it can, mobilize a community that was already so angry about what had been done to Mahsa Amini, and angry of the years and years and years of oppression, that was enough. And enough took action. And then they're silencing all the dissenting voices because they know that if they have one leader, they're screwed.
And of course, this gets back to the role of art in protest. Art
Absolutely.
as a propellant for democracy in and of itself. Of course, Václav Havel, the famous Czech playwright, targeted by the communist regimes during the 20th century.
That's in solitary confinement himself.
Exactly. For precisely that, the role of his art, the role that art, the impact that art had on those suffering underneath those authoritarian regimes, of course, eventually freed and eventually leading the Czech Republic itself. And we can only hope for the same trajectory for Toomaj for years to come. Many more songs, many more albums.
Yeah.
For himself, and of course, inspiring future generations of Iranian hip hop artists and more.
Yeah, 100%. And like Claudia said, it's important to remember just because the death sentence was overturned and a lot of media reports made it sound like, oh, nice, done, that it's not done until he's out.
Negin, is there anything else you want us to know about Toomaj?
Yes, I want to add something that why he is important for all of us, especially for Iranian society. In his music, Toomaj reflects all the problems and issues of Iranian society. He declares himself the voice of those silenced by the regime. He also creates videos where he speaks with people, raising awareness of their rights and empowering them to fight for them. So he became a symbol of bravery and a hero to Iranians. Everyone made him their role model, and he has become the voice of a nation. And he carries the hopes of many, including me. And he's more than just a rapper. Toomaj leads Iranian society through his art and courage. And his voice is ours. And that's why he's so important to us.
What a beautiful sentiment.
Yes.
Negin, I wanted to let you know that my 1-year-old daughter, she doesn't speak any Farsi, not yet at least. But I was playing some Toomaj for her the other day. I don't remember which songs, but she was dancing. She was feeling the music. So we were having fun.
Oh, I love that.
In our own little way of supporting him.
Love that.
But again, thank you so much for joining us today, for continuing the fight. Obviously, we're thinking of you and thinking of Toomaj, and we will continue the pressure any way we can. And Claudia, thanks to you for leading the fight here at HRF as well.
If you want to sneak him another little message, thank him for the one he shared with us on this program and let him know we're rooting for him.
Yeah, and we hope next year maybe he'll be on the Oslo Freedom Forum stage.
Absolutely.
I would love to see a performance from him.
Absolutely, I'm ready.
Let's do it. Thanks so much.
Hope so. Thank you too for inviting me, and it was very nice to meet you all here.
Lovely to meet you.
Thanks, Negin. We'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. The Human Rights Foundation is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that promotes and protects human rights globally with a focus on closed societies. We promote freedom where it's most at risk, in countries ruled by authoritarian regimes.